is Deanna, and today my speech is going to be on the communication of love in Asian American families. So people give and receive love differently, especially in familial contexts, and Asian American immigrant families often show them in many different ways from westernized ideals of love. And often they're misinterpreted as cold-hearted or strict because they don't display love through physical gestures or verbal communication as westernized families often do. They communicate their care through nonverbal actions instead, more often than verbal communication. And this is often also due to differences in cultural context, where Asian American immigrant families have cultures from where they immigrated from that they use to integrate into their communication of love when they immigrate to America. And westernized families also communicate their love through their language and physical gestures more often than Asian immigrant families do, which are often the standard for how you display love, but neither forms of love are invalid. So in Asian American immigrant families, the communication of love is achieved through nonverbal actions more often than verbal communications of love. For an example, if I got into an argument with my mother, it would be pretty rare that she would come in, sit down, and apologize to me. Rather, she would show her forgiveness through bringing in a bowl of cut fruit or preparing a meal for me, which to me is a form of telling me that she is sorry and she wants that forgiveness in her heart. And this is a gesture that is very common among other Asian American children as well. Just communication of love, saying I love you, I'm sorry, is not very common, and often it's kind of uncomfortable to hear it. But yeah, gestures of love also can include like making breakfast, getting up early to do so, helping to clean, just these forms of love that just represent an I love you without actually having to say it. And in the book Battle Hymn of the Tiger Mother, Amy Chua explores this idea and reminds us that the reason that we show these nonverbal gestures of love is simply because we're not used to hearing it, especially in Asian countries where gestures of love, these actions, just speak much louder and are more meaningful than actually saying I love you, I'm sorry, and other phrases of care. So it is very important to understand cultural context when it comes to interpreting how Asian American immigrant families display their love. And a big reason for this is differences in priorities. In Asian American immigrant families, there's often an emphasis on the need for individuality and strength in themselves. And this often results in the lack of verbal communication through like acknowledgement of accomplishments, acknowledgement of the pride that a parent may feel for their children. And in turn, the parents do believe that this builds strength, that this builds character, and that there is more meaning to finding love through their actions and reading their actions rather than just simply hearing it. And so these differences in priorities and individuality, in comparison to westernized counterparts where Westernized parents often show their love simply through saying I love you, through physical gestures. It's just a matter of different cultural contexts. And in our textbook called Real Communication, the authors explain the importance of keeping an open mind and when it comes to intercultural misunderstanding. Just because there are differences in how culture perceives and gives love doesn't mean that they are invalid forms of love. And in contrast, Westernized families often display their love for their children through physical gestures like hugging, kissing, as well as verbal language. The communication of simply saying, I love you, I care about you, and I am here for you. And this is often the standard for how love is seen. Like if a parent shows that they say I love you often, others will see that this family is very loving of their children. And it's just seen differently in Asian American immigrant families, where they can often be perceived as not as loving just because that physical and verbal communication is not there. In Saving Face, The Emotional Cost of the Asian Immigrant Family Myth, author Angie Y. Chung explains that she often also felt that Westernized parents looked down on her mother for maybe not displaying their love enough, and she was often criticized for these different displays of her communication. Author Angie Y. Chung also goes on to further explain that these often perceived strict and overbearing natures of these communications of love is due to the emphasis on how parents want their children to become when they're older. They really find it important that their children become independent adults, that they become obedient and just successful and driven. And because of this, they often just don't agree with how Western parents raise their children, that usually don't have such an emphasis on obedience the same way that Asian American immigrant families do. But there are no invalid forms of love. The different ways that love is shown in families, no matter what culture, it's just a matter of understanding the context behind it and interpreting the different meanings behind it, even if it's not shown all in the same way. Differences in how Asian American families communicate their love should not ever be criticized simply because they are different from what is the set standard. And in America, it is usually through physical gestures as well as verbal communication. However love is shown, understanding of it is key, and misinterpretation of love is often just due to misunderstanding of culture. Thank you for listening to my presentation on the differences in communication of love in Asian American immigrant families versus Westernized families. Thank you.